So we're just calling the extension of the continuation of last month's meeting.
No, sir. We're opening this meeting today.
Okay,
A call to order, pledge of allegiance, and then we'll convene the closed session for item number 1.
okay. Call to order. Can you take roll call real quick?
Present. Here.
Here. Pledge allegiance, Jonathan.
Yes. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mr. Chair, let me just, with belt and suspenders, let me just ask to make sure that nobody wants to make public comment on closed session agenda items.
Okay.
We have a very good. Is this the recording?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, I stepped outside and spoke with the individuals in the hallway. No one wanted to make a comment on closed session agenda items.
Okay, then we will adjourn to closed session at this time. So turn off your mics. Welcome, everybody, to the September 17th regularly scheduled meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Airport District Board of Directors. We already had our roll call and pledge of allegiance before going into closed session. I ask if you have a cell phone, if you could please turn it off or at least quiet it so we're not disturbed here. Want to thank everybody for showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I can't remember when we had this many people. Well, yes, I can. It's when we talked about the fire contract. That brought a lot of people in also. Okay. We did have a closed session. We took no action and we have nothing to report from that.
Mr. Chair, we just as a reminder, we do need to go back into closed session. Item number 2 and 3 have not yet been discussed, so
That would be
that will be
after,
after.
yes, the regular portion of the meeting. Okay. Announcements from staff. Does staff have any announcements to make at this time?
Yes, we have one. At the last meeting, you tasked staff with organizing an open house to show people what we're doing with the safety enhancement program and the status of the projects and the footprint. So we have a date for that. We have not publicized it yet. We're working on the last details, but it will be Wednesday, October 22nd, here at the airport from 4:30 to 6:30, and we'll be providing tours of the construction that we've been working on. So that is in front of you as a draft, but it will be publicized this week.
Very good. Does the board have any announcements? Okay.
None.
Okay. Public comment. So for items not on the agenda, any member of the public can talk to the board for up to 3 minutes. Again, it should be related. It should not be on the agenda, and it should be related to something the airport has jurisdiction over. So noise and these ordinances will be our first item we will discuss on the regular agenda. Item number A1. Does any member of the public wish to make a comment?
On non-agenda items.
On non-agenda items. Okay. Please stand up, and if you could state your name and the city that you live in.
Good morning. I live in Seaside. My name is Sarah Hunter,
And I have two requests that I would like the board to consider. One is that you have your regular meetings at a different time and day that would make it more accessible.
I think you need to speak up. I don't,
I
Is
would,
the mic on? Mic's on. Okay.
Mike, are you here? I would like to ask that the board consider changing the hour and the day of the board meetings, and for the standing committees, that you make them also available by Zoom, and that you provide us the minutes, in particular with the airport services meeting after the meetings. And my second request is on the airport website. I've mentioned it to Jonathan prior to the meeting, that where you have the one FAA designated flight path that shows noise sensitive to the south and nothing over the most densely populated area of Seaside, that the airport itself could still create an image so that pilots visiting us will know, instead of flying from Salinas down deep into Seaside and then back up to land at Monterey, they just come like this. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello? Is that one?
I don't
you just
believe,
need to speak up.
You just have to speak up. It doesn't
Doesn't broadcast.
broadcast.
Doesn't amplify?
Broadcast.
I see.
Hello? My name's Robert Yowie. I live right across the airport on the other side of alternate number 3 runway on the right side. And I would like to ask you, and this is a formal request, I'm on the board of directors for the Casanova Oakville Neighborhood Association, and you were directed to form a citizens advisory committee and involve the community. You've appointed 2 members of the board. They are not holding regular meetings. And with this speaking, I'm asking you to please follow through, form a citizens advisory committee with people from the community. And I'm requesting that since we are an adjacent neighborhood association, that we have a seat on the board for the neighborhood, for the airport advisory committee. And would you please make it a functional committee instead of 2 people with their names on paper? Thank you.
We do have meetings of the Air Service and Community Relations Boards. Those occur monthly. You can find the dates and times on our agenda. They usually occur at the beginning of the week, beginning of the month.
Mr. Chair, we do have one hand raised online.
Any other person in the general audience wish to talk on something not on the agenda? Go ahead.
My name is Helen Birdsong. I live in Delray Oaks, and I've asked at every meeting I've attended that the time be changed of these meetings. It almost seems that it's deliberate to make sure very few people come. Today is an exception, an amazing exception. If you made it on a weekend or an evening, there's got to be a time when people that work can attend. 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, if anybody's working, you've ruled them out. They can't come. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to talk? You only get one bite of the apple.
Zoom for the subcommittee meeting. So
Okay. Okay, why don't we close public comment on this?
Yeah, we have
Online.
one online.
Yeah, for in the audience, and I'll move to online. So you're gonna have to help me out with the name because
Says-
I cannot read it from here. It's a little blurred.
S25.
Yes, good morning. My name is Esther Malkin. I'm the president of the Neighborhood Association of the Laguna Grande neighborhood, which is adjacent to the Casanova Oak Knoll neighborhood and directly affected by the noise levels. I want to echo what the previous speakers mentioned. You guys are elected officials, and by having a meeting at this hour, you are eliminating the majority, a large majority of your constituents that elected you from participating in this process. And your transparency is in question because of that. So I agree with the previous people that the time needs to be changed. I'm not saying that it should be on a weekend. I'm sure you guys all have something good to do on the weekends, that you don't want to be tied up doing this on top of your hours that you put in anyway. But an evening session at 6, 7 p.m., like city councils do, like other committees do, at least once in a while would be a way of making this whole process more transparent and participatory. And I again remind you all, you are elected officials, and it is up to you to engage with the people who elected you. And holding meetings at this hour and time is not practical. And I agree with having more residents and citizens participate on your committees, and anything else that we all should be connected to that would influence and inform you guys to make decisions on our behalf, and not just the business community and the airport beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member remotely wishing to talk?
It would, yeah, it would show if there, it raises from to the top, but there are no other hands online. Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
I'll close public comment at this time. Consent agenda. Consent agenda items are routine by nature. They come with a staff recommendation to approve. Usually there are minutes from our various committees. Does any member of the public wish to withdraw a item from the consent agenda? Either remotely or present? Any member of the board or staff wish to withdraw an item from consent agenda? I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a first by Director Leffel and a second by Director Gagliani. Can we have a roll call, please?
Director Amati,
Aye.
Director Gagliardi,
Aye.
Director Pick,
Yes.
Director Leffel,
Yes.
Chair Miller.
Yes. Okay, approved unanimously. Let's move on to the regular agenda. We will start off with item number I1. This is the second reading of ordinance number 933, an ordinance to repeal ordinances 308, 309, and 310.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, again, as you mentioned, the second reading of this ordinance 933. As we have discussed at almost every meeting for the last 5 months, I believe, including it with air services before that. We've discussed the infirmity of ordinances 308, 309, and 310. I want to just get into a PowerPoint slide. We're going to march through, what we're talking about, why we think this is necessary. And am I able to share my screen? Let's see. Let me. Okay, hang on 1 second. Okay. Let me do this one more time. Sorry about this. Okay, share PowerPoint. There it is. That's okay. Let me just share the whole thing. I'll just share my desktop. Yeah, unfortunately, Zoom updated before this meeting. It updated this morning and it turned off the screen sharing. And when I just turned it back on, it said, quit Zoom and restart it. And if I do that, it'll drop me out of the meeting. So I may, let me, the thumb drive?
Give us a minute.
Yeah. Let me log out and then log in.
There you go then.
Yep. Excellent. Take a look. It is not showing up online right now. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now, okay, and it is showing up online. Excellent. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
What do we expect? You're an attorney.
Well, you know, I actually pride myself on not having them, which is why I went to a Mac from a PC because I had a lot before. But anyway, Murphy's Law, I guess, is in full force. So we have, again, at the last 5+ meetings, including some from Air Services before that, we have discussed the infirmity of these ordinances 308, 309, and 310. We want to jump in and go through that for everybody who's here in fairly quick fashion, although it won't be as quick as always desired. But the very first thing I want to mention, though, let's move to the next slide. So the first thing that I want to mention, that's okay, just advance it one. By hitting the space bar. There you go. Okay. So we want to start with the Enabling Act, which is the purpose of what the airport is here for. The purposes of the act are to empower and enable the district to acquire, own, lease, improve, operate, maintain, or cause to be operated and maintained a public airport. The mission is to provide users access to the national air transportation system and to operate in a safe, efficient, and fiscally responsible manner. Now, I want to, again, let's move on to the next slide. I want to, oh, that's not it. You know, let's, no. Here, let me do this real quick. Okay. First, I want to talk about this resolution that was passed in July. One of the comments that we are, it was in July. Yeah, it was in July.
Please, no response from the audience. We have a chance for public comment later.
So the resolution 1910 was passed in July. The argument has always been the FAA, after these ordinances were put in place, the FAA, both before they were put in place and after they put in place, and we'll get into these in just a minute, the FAA disallowed the subjects that ordinances 308, 309, and 310 purport to regulate. They specifically said you cannot do that except as voluntary only. Voluntary only. In July, this resolution was passed that puts into place that voluntary nature that the FAA said was the only way to do this. So in what we're recommending, we are recommending, again, we'll keep going here in a minute, but we are recommending the repeal of ordinances 308, 309, and 310. But I want to be clear, this does not change what will happen at the airport. The ordinances were only approved as voluntary by the FAA. And again, we'll show that in just a minute. This resolution incorporates that. It embraces that, and it puts in place the very regulations from ordinances 308, 309, 310 on a voluntary basis. So it does that. And so my comment would be, by repealing the ordinances, you're not losing anything. You still have all of the options of that some of the individuals have requested. You have all of those options of talking to the FAA about flight paths and putting in place these voluntary, time restrictions and voluntary limits on touch and go operations and stop and go operations. You still have that. It's all right here. Let's go. Okay. Ordinances 308, 309, and 310. They were passed. Ordinance 308 was passed on January 10 of 79. Ordinances 309 and 310 were in December of 1978. Ordinance 308 purports to limit the hours of operation of the Monterey Regional Airport, but it does contain exceptions for emergency aircraft, military aircraft, and all aircraft that meet the lowest takeoff and landing levels of Amendment 8 to FAR 36. As well as some runway use requirements. Now, I'll get into FAR 36, but I want to just highlight for you right now before I move on to 309 and 310. The planes that fly in and out of the airport today are far quieter than they were in 1978 and 79. They all meet Amendment 8 to FAR Regulation 36. They are all more quiet than the lowest maximum level. And again, that Amendment 8 to FAR 36, and I've got a copy of it. If someone wants me to email it to them, I can. What it did was it set up the stage 2 aircraft, stage 3 aircraft, and it had noise levels associated with each, right? And what it did, Amendment 8 put in place a maximum amount of noise that could be emitted by aircraft. And the heavier the aircraft, the louder they allowed it to be. Now, I will tell you, if we take the lightest of the aircraft that regulation mentions, and we use the lowest maximum sound levels that are acceptable, and we apply it to all aircraft that fly in and out of Monterey comply with that today. They comply with it. The jets do. The piston aircraft do. All of them comply with that. And again, we'll show that here in just a minute. Ordinance 309 purports to regulate the altitude of aircraft under various components of flight, like while turning in the pattern, departing the pattern, overflight of terrain, etc. And it goes from 5 miles north to 5 miles south of the airport. And then Ordinance 310 attempts to establish regulations related to touch and go and stop and go operations by aircraft, and what it purports to do is, I believe, if I'm going from memory, it allows 4 per hour per aircraft. Is that right? Two per 2. Okay.
No, 4 per 2 hour period.
4 per 2 hour. That's what it is. It's 4 per 2 hour period. And per aircraft. So that's where these ordinances, what they attempt to do. So for various reasons, each of these does violate the U.S. Constitution or grant assurances or has some other legal infirmity. Every one of them does. For example, each of the ordinances contain a provision that restrict the right to use the airport. It essentially bans individuals from using the airport if they violate these ordinances. And it imposed fines, penalties, and again, I said a ban from using the airport. Well, in Santa Monica Airport Association versus City of Santa Monica, the district court found that the penalty statute violated the equal protection in the Commerce Clause. And so the court affirmed the invalidation of those ordinances. And it was, again, both the district court and the appellate court both held that. They held that penalties and fines violate equal protection and commerce clauses, and the ban violate equal protection and commerce clauses. Every one of these ordinances has those provisions. And that's problematic. And the reason why is there's a term called a severance clause. If an ordinance contains a severance clause, if a term is found to be unconstitutional, then it can be severed from the ordinance and the rest of the ordinance can remain standing. None of these contain severance clauses. None of them. And the rule, the California Supreme Court held the rule is well settled where such a severability clause is included, the valid portion can remain, and the unconstitutional and the partially unconstitutional part will not. So to put that in layman's terms, the middle bullet point, if there's no severability clause and the language contains the ordinance contains unconstitutional language, then the entire ordinance falls. And that's, again, a case from 1942 by the Supreme Court. It's been well settled for a long time and has never been overturned. Now, these ordinances also attempt to regulate airspace. And we frequently use the analogy here. We can control things that are on the ground in many ways. But once they leave the ground, we have no more control. That is squarely the purview of the federal government. And as I mentioned, in general, federal law will supersede state law. Federal law will supersede local ordinances. That's just how it is. So these ordinances also violate 49 USC 40103. They also have never been enforced by the airport. Again, except as voluntary, right? We've published, we published pamphlets for pilots. We have it posted in the FBOs, and the flight training school has it posted there. That these ordinances are voluntary, and we request compliance. Resolution 1910 that I put at the very beginning incorporates all of that. So you're not losing anything from eliminating these ordinances. Now, I did mention, I highlighted this already, but Ordinance 308, even if you left it on the books, is totally ineffective, 100%, because it pins the noise level to what essentially is 89 decibels per aircraft. Every aircraft that flies in and out of the airport meets those levels. They're below those levels. And I have I've sent it out to some who previously requested it. The FAA publishes a list of aircraft, of types of aircraft with types of engines, and you can see the decibel level for each of them. And they put it actually quite in a user-friendly format, which is surprising. Every aircraft, usually you would think they would go alphabetical, but they actually do it by decibel level. And so you can draw a line and say, okay, here, everything above this line cannot fly into the airport. They are all airplanes that would not be able to functionally come in and out of the airport, or they're aircraft that don't fly anymore. And I'll give you just one example. The top one on the list is the Concorde. Concorde makes a lot of noise, and particularly during takeoff and landing. First off, I don't think we have the runway length for the Concorde. Secondly, even if we did, it's not flying anymore. It's not around. Everything on that list is not flying or does not come into this airport. Everything above that line, everything below that line is acceptable. Now, again, I highlighted this already. Aircraft noise levels are listed in the FAA Advisory Circular 36-3H. If anybody wants a copy, send me an email or just tell me and I'll send an email to them with it. I've hit this hard. Every aircraft that flies in and out is below that threshold. And again, if memory serves, the threshold is 89 decibels. So even if this were left in place, it is completely ineffective. And it just can't regulate anything because aircraft have gotten quieter. And by the way, 10 years from now, aircraft will be quieter than they are today. 50 years from now, hopefully they won't make any noise at all. I mean, with the way technology is going, they're getting quieter and quieter and quieter. Now, there's been a comment about CEQA NEPA compliance. This is not a project. Eliminating these ordinances is not a project under CEQA. However, even if it were a project under CEQA, even if it were, there would be no significant impact to the environment. And again, that's the standard. And I want to make sure that you understand that. That is the standard is there's CEQA only applies if there's a potential for causing a significant effect on the environment where it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that there's a significant effect on the environment. The activity is not subject to CEQA. You have in place a voluntary resolution that incorporates Ordinance 308, 309, and 310. You've never been enforcing these ordinances. They've been voluntary only. So because they've been voluntary, you have in place now what would remain in effect from what Ordinance 308, 309, and 310 attempted to regulate. You have that now. You don't lose anything. You're not moving backwards. You're staying right where you are. There's no possibility these can have a significant effect on the environment because they were voluntary. Most people will comply, but they're voluntary. Now, this is not a project under CEQA, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the board from what was passed previously. But let me outline these two sections. 15301 says that projects is not a project if it is an item related to minor alteration of existing public facilities. Now I put up in there, i.e. airways. The statute doesn't say airways, but my argument is that airways are included. Now, that's not the strongest point. The next one is far stronger. A project does not include continuing administrative or maintenance activities such as purchase for supplies, personnel related actions, general policy and procedure making. And let me just continue on with what was left off here. It says in the statute again, 15378, 14 CCR 15378, under B, it says project does not include, the definition of project does not include organizational or administrative activities of governments that will not result in direct or indirect physical changes in the environment. That's squarely what we have here, because the ordinances were only approved by the FAA as voluntary, and they've never been enforced by the airport. So we did have, prior to the publication of this agenda, we had received a significant amount of comments related and concerns related to this repeal. We want to address those comments and concerns. Now, I will tell you, we have received in the last 72 plus hours about 1/8 of an inch of paper worth of comments, double-sided. They've all been forwarded to you when we receive them, and they have all been printed for you at the dais. We likely respond to most of these, but because of the timing of when they came in, we couldn't go through them and add slides to talk about them. So We're going to talk about all of the comments and concerns that were previously raised. Very likely we address the concerns that are in these comments as well, but I want to highlight that.
I'm going to take it from here for a little bit. So first, one of the concerns was that the tower is not staffed between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. despite operations occurring, including the recent GA accident. That is correct. The air traffic control tower is not staffed 24/7, but the air traffic control, at least for the last 30 years, has not been staffed 24/7. But operations outside those hours are still communicating with air traffic control. They are communicating through the Northern California Terminal Radar Approach Center. So it's called NorCal, and it's not the TRACON, which provides approach and departure control services and adheres to airport procedures under 14 CFR 91.126-91.131. The next concern was runway use direction frequently changes during the day, not always tied to wind directions. FAA Order 7110.65 directs controllers to assign runways considering wind direction, cloud ceiling minimums, operational safety, and efficiency. And we have that link here as a resource. So it is not just wind that ties the direction of the runway, but a multiple of factors that the air traffic controllers monitor. The next concern is operations often conducted with tailwinds rather than into the prevailing west-northwest winds. Air traffic control provides runway use based on multiple weather factors, I just said. It is important to note that tailwind components are a factor of manufacturer aircraft specifications. So there are specifications for each aircraft on how they can fly in windy conditions that the pilots are made aware of, but also airline operators, each airline operator, for example, United or American or Alaska, like we have, often set even more stringent standards than the manufacturer's requirements. And the pilot in command is ultimately responsible for the safe conduct of a flight. And if the pilot in command determines that deviation is required, it is their responsibility to do that safely. The next concern is Monterey reported as having doubled the missed approaches of comparable airports with diversions common. Missed approaches, or another term would be a go-around, and diversions are accounted for in the FAA safety analysis. And equipment outages are coordinated through notice to airmen or NOTAMs. FAA approach charts include a runway sketch on each chart to make important airport information, the traffic pattern, and the procedures accessible to pilots. And again, we have a reference here under the Code of Federal Regulations. So the pilots have this information at the ready if they are not lined up correctly or need to go around. The next slide just shows you an example of an aircraft operating manual. And here are the wind limitations and the decision points under this type of an aircraft. They have them for all, so we just wanted to provide an example. Also, this was a study that was done and presented to the board back in 2002. And it is an analysis of our availabilities from our runways. So this is from 10 right, which would be coming in over the ocean from the west to the east. And it shows that in the middle of the day is when it's most windy. That yellow area is when it's most windy and most likely not available to the pilots. But it also shows that the runway is potentially capable of handling arrivals year-round, except for, as we said, those higher wind periods in the spring and summer afternoons when steady onshore winds exceed the tailwind limitation. Similar for 28 left, I'm sorry, and its availability. And when you marry these together, you see how we do operate is in the middle of the day. That's the best time that that runway is available. Although on the right, it does show that it is potentially available anytime. It's capable of handling arrivals all year round. But 28 left is highest during daylight hours, during onshore winds from daytime heating, and during calmer wind conditions in the summer. So that is an analysis that's been done, and that's typical weather patterns, but we know that typical is not always typical. So Again, it's the air traffic controller's responsibility to be monitoring these winds and monitoring the weather conditions and providing that information to pilots. Concern on the next is that instrument approach availability and NOTAMs affecting ability to land safely in fog, dark, and storms. FAA Order 8260 governs instrument procedure development. The FAA owned instrument landing system, which is an ILS for 10 right, again, that is the direction coming in off the ocean, is the most precise and accurate approach that we have available to our pilots here at Monterey. Pilots are ultimately responsible, again, under the Code of Federal Regulations for safe operation, including assessing tailwinds and those ceiling limitations. The automated weather observing system provides continuous minute-by-minute observations on the field and performs the basic observing functions necessary to generate an aviation routine weather report, or in aviation terms, which we love our acronyms, METAR, and other aviation weather information. Airfield weather conditions are reported on the Automatic Terminal Information Service, or the ATIS, a continuous broadcast of aviation information for pilots and via air traffic control communications. Equipment outages or abnormal field conditions are coordinated through those NOTAMs, those notice to airmen, and they're also broadcast on the ATIS. So weather conditions are continually being monitored according to this slide by the weather observing system that we have on the field and by the air traffic controllers. Next concern is the ILS for 28 left, often out of service. Only precision approaches ILS 10 right. Well, there never has been an ILS system for 28 left. 28 left does have a localizer, a GPS, and a visual approach options to the pilots. The instrument landing system, as I provided before, the ILS is on 10 right, and that is our most precise and accurate approach. The next concern, runway safety area project in 2015 created a slope west end 157 feet east and 267 feet, possibly forcing larger aircraft to land from the west with tailwinds. The RSA project did not change the slope of the main runway. It did shorten the runway by about 428 feet. The length was 7,603 feet. 10 right and 28 left has always had a 1.4%, not inch, should be percent slope from east to west, and the current length of the runway is 7,175 feet, or 1.36 miles. Runway slopes are designed within the airport, the AC 150 5300-13, and limits and are reviewed during the RSA projects. Aircraft take many factors, including the slope, into consideration when landing and departing any runway, and even our runway. Next concern was repeal of the curfews, minimum altitudes, and limits on flight school operations. Flight operations at public use airports are governed by 14 CFR Part 91. FAA regulations and grant assurance 22 states, the airport, it will make the airport available as an airport for public use on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination to all types, kinds, and classes of aeronautical activities, including commercial aeronautical activities offering services to the public at the airport. Pilots must operate in accordance with Part 91, 14 CFR, including maintaining safe altitudes and avoiding hazardous flights. The next concern that we had was pilots, including from flight schools, hiding tail numbers from public tracking apps. Participation in programs that limit the availability of aircraft registration or flight information on public tracking websites, for example, through the limiting aircraft data display or privacy ICAO address programs is not prohibited. However, such participation does not relieve the pilot in command, the operator, or the certificate holder from compliance with all applicable statutes, regulations, and operational requirements. Next concern is departures to the west not consistently following published noise abatement procedures. 2 to 6 per day. The Fly Neighborly program has always been a voluntary program, as we've been providing to you throughout this presentation. Staff work with tenants to communicate these voluntary recommendations, requesting they use the quietest departure techniques and follow published pattern altitudes and procedures when safety, weather, and/or traffic conditions permit. And below, we have an excerpt from what ANCA, the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1999 states. This is the same one that we showed before, but here is Resolution 1910 that it was adopted on July 16th of 2025. We absolutely can provide the copy of that for anyone that would like to see it. It was also in the packet for that board meeting, as well as in the subsequent packet as part of the minutes.
Chris, let's do this. Let me read this so that members of the public know what's in it. I'm not gonna read all the whereas. Okay, well, this is our meeting, so if you want to be here, that's fine. Number 1 says the above recitals are true and correct, which
Please.
lays the groundwork for this. Number 2, the district adopts this resolution 1910 to recommend and request that all pilots and aircraft comply with its voluntary noise management criteria, which are attached as Exhibit A and can be found on the district's website, which includes but is not limited to preferential runway usage and VFR turn altitude guidance, pattern altitude standards for propeller, turbine, and helicopter operations, parameters for touch and go operations, and practice approaches per existing guidelines, nighttime voluntary curfew hours from 2300 hours to 0700 hours, with a PPR requirement for turbine aircraft operations, and that's a detailed thing for a turbine aircraft to land, after hours. That's what it says. It incorporates exactly what 308, 309, and 310 tried to do, but in an unconstitutional way. It adopts what the FAA said you could do. It takes the limit of what the FAA said you could do, and it incorporates it in that resolution.
And then from this, you can see that it is provided on our website, as we said we would do, and also it is posted all over at our FBOs and our flight school. So the next concern is experiencing more overflights, dramatic increase in traffic, repetitive practice circuits. So the FAA publishes a terminal area forecast and records the following annual operations. So in 2008, Monterey had 80,602 annual operations. In 2017, Monterey had 99,184 annual operations. In 2023, which is the last one that's recorded, 2024 won't be recorded until January of this next year. They're always a year in the rears. Monterey had 53,167 annual operations. So the final 2019 master plan anticipated approximately for 2023 64,600. So we are well within the analysis that was done in our master plan, and actually under. Also, the TAF recorded 10,700 of those 53,167 operations. 10,791 were airline operations, and the airport master plan anticipated that there would be approximately 12,000. So we are again underneath the number of airline operations that were anticipated and studied in our master plan.
Can you explain what an operation is?
Operation is anything that comes to the airport annually. So here comes and goes. Here is the TAF. Again, we've provided on the previous slide and right here in the corner that resource and that link that you can get it. Showing you all the way back to 1990, which is when ANCA came into existence. So they are tracking it through 1990. And you can see that even some of the highest numbers from 1990 were 1992, when we had 118,000 annual operations. Next page, please. You will see.
Chris, I also think you told Jonathan and me the other day that this is information that the tower reports annually. It is not self-reported. It's not by the airlines. It's not by the FBO. It is what is captured by the tower. Okay.
That's correct. This also shows you continuing down the operations and those numbers that I provided to you before, the 88,000 and the 99,184, down to the 2023 of the 53,167 with the 5th column over is 10,791 commercial operations. One more slide, a small one after this. This is something from a master plan that we had going back to 65. And it shows that we had here at the airport operations as high as 133,388 in 1971. I would point out that we were Air Station Monterey Bay at that time, and about 20% of that were military operations that were coming out of here because we were Naval Air Station Monterey Bay until 1972. Lack of updated noise studies since 2007 or ever in many neighborhoods. So noise analyses were a component of both the runway safety area project environmental review that was completed in 2012 and a component of the updated master plan environmental review that was completed in 2020. Part 150 establishes the process for airports to evaluate and mitigate noise impacts. Noise studies are periodically updated as operations change or as projects are anticipated, and participation by local jurisdictions and communities is part of the approved process. I would note in the bottom that in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, Congress directed FAA to conduct several reviews and studies of noise-related issues, including metrics, cost, benefits, and of phasing out older and noisier aircraft and potentially health economic impacts of overflight and noise. While several of these studies have been completed, others are still ongoing, and the results may be of interest to Congress as it re-examines federal aviation and airport noise policies and programs in the context of considering reauthorization of federal civil aviation programs. And that's one of the things that Congress is looking at right now, and they're actually looking at a different metrics rather than the day-night metrics that they currently use today, and are not funding any studies until they complete this analysis and see if the metric that they're using currently is still effective. One more resource that I have for you here is the master plan resource. Again, it's just solidifying the information that I provided in the previous slides, that the forecast for annual operations for 2023 from airline operations, which is the second black line down, third column to the right, was 12,000. Annual operations totally at the bottom, the total operations was anticipated to be 64,600, and we are below that as provided. The master plan did evaluate in 3 separate ways a lot of different environmental concerns. So in the environmental impact report under CEQA, it evaluated aesthetics, agriculture and forest resources, air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, energy, geology and soils, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards and hazardous materials, and hydrology and water quality. Under NEPA, again, we did 2 analyses on the master plan for this, and this was for the safety enhancement program that we're currently implementing. It was studied as it relates to air quality, biological resources, climate, Department of Transportation, Section 4F, hazardous materials, solid waste, and pollution prevention, historical, architectural, and archaeological and cultural resources, natural resources and energy supply, noise and compatible land use, social economic impacts, visual impacts, water resources, both surface and groundwater, and cumulative impacts. So that's all under NEPA. And then finally, the master plan analysis was then studied by the county and incorporated into the adopted 2019 Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, or a CLUP. And it related to Monterey environments, airport facilities and improvements, compatible policies, and Monterey compatible zones criteria as it relates to noise, safety, and compatible zones, and airspace protection. So the master plan and these forecasts were all studied in all of these different analyses. Community concern. Next is no navigation easements in Old Town, New Monterey, Pacific Road, Seaside, or Del Rio, despite regular overflights. FAA grant assurances require airports to preserve compatible land use, but do not give airports zoning authority. That responsibility lies within the Airport Land Use Commission and local jurisdictions. So navigation easements are tools to protect both communities and airports, but must be secured through local action. I would say that we as an airport, work with the Airport Land Use Commission when projects come forward. And that is always a request that we have, is that we have an navigation easement for a project, a development that might be happening. And we do that also with the city of Monterey when they provide us with plans for redevelopment or rezoning or a different improvement. So it is something that we do when the projects come forward. The other is Airport Land Use ALUC, Area of Influence, not updated to reflect today's expanded operations impact. The ALUC is a 7-member Monterey County Commission created under the authority of the California State Aeronautics Act. The January 2019 Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan reflects the current operations, flight paths, and fleet mix that use Monterey Regional Airport. As I stated in the previous one, and on this slide too, this is part of that plan, and it shows all the types of aircraft that were anticipated, that were using the airport and are anticipated to use the airport in the future. And anything that comes in today is included on this chart. So it does take into account all activities that are happening at the airport. I just wanted to show a couple things. These are easement trackings that we have. This is one of our plans from our airport layout plan. And this shows to our east, all of the areas that we have navigation easements in. That's to the west. So that is all of the areas that were done through the residential soundproofing and sound insulation program, which we insulated out of 925 dwelling units. So units that were eligible, we insulated 852 of those units. Those were the participants that chose to participate in that program. And it was with $23 million of FAA funded programs. So all of those in that show all of the areas that we have navigation easements under the residential soundproofing program. And then the next. These are all the areas to the east that we have navigation easements currently existing. So everything out from Pasadena up on Laurellis Grade and all of those areas up there, and then through Ryan Ranch as we come east. The next concern is emissions and health impact in neighbors now more regularly overflown. The arrival and departure instrument approach procedures have not changed since the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan was adopted. The frequency of aircraft is below historic levels. Air quality analyses were completed, as I mentioned, in the 2012 as part of the runway safety area project environmental review, and in 2020 as part of the updated master plan environmental review. Community input was an important part of both the NEPA and CEQA, ensuring potential impacts were considered. The next, early morning departures and late arrivals. And there'll be a number of these here, but I want to stop here. So airline flight schedules have historically had early morning departures and evening arrivals at Monterey as provided by these sample schedules. So the first one you're seeing here is 2002. And you can see the early morning arrivals over up on, and highlighted on the right side. And there were 5 of them, 3 at the top, 1 below it and another below it. And late night arrivals after 11 p.m. up till 11:30 or 11:45 on the left. Next one is 2009, I believe. I don't have my glasses on for that part, right? Sorry. And again, still showing that we've had early morning, all those departures to the right. And actually an arrival at 1:30 something in the morning was one of the latest that we've seen, as well as another one. Next one is in 2018. We had, again, early morning departures and late night arrivals or after 11 p.m. And the next one is 2022, where we had early morning departures and late arrivals. So consistently, the airport since 2002, which is as far back as I can find any of our schedules, have had those early morning before 6 a.m. departures and after 11 p.m. arrivals.
Okay. So I referenced these letters previously, these letters from the FAA that disavowed or disallowed the ordinances that were passed. This is an FAA letter or an excerpt of an FAA letter. It has some quotes from it. In 1975, the airport conducted a master plan study, right? They prepared a draft master plan, sent it to the FAA for consideration. Included as item 9 of that airport master plan, it said, discourage requests for touch and go landing and practice instrument approaches by military or commercial aircraft. Now, we'll note it doesn't include non-commercial, but that's just a note. It says what it says. Discourage requests. The FAA, in responding to that, said, item 9 of that program appears to be discriminatory and may be in violation of past assurances. And they went on to say discrimination as proposed in item 9 strictly on the basis of noise abatement cannot be sanctioned at present by the FAA. Now, this pre-exists the ordinances. Okay, but let's go a little further. After the ordinances were enacted, but not enforced, and it's important to note that, the airport conducted an airport noise compatibility program study. And the airport noise compatibility program was dated October 30th of 1985. It contained 31 noise-related measures. 31. The FAA disagreed with several of them. In particular, the 3 that are directly at issue in Ordinance 308, 309, and 310, the FAA disagreed with them. First one, it says, and again, this is quoting the FAA letter. Item 10 listed a desire to limit, restrict, or transfer local training operations. And they specifically disagreed, stating in that letter, training restrictions, which they're found on page 3-9 of that airport noise compatibility plan that was submitted by the airport. Training restrictions, the airport proprietor is advised that certain provisions of the ordinance appear to attempt to regulate aircraft operations, preferential runway usage, and the maintenance of flight proficiency in a manner that is preempted by federal government. The FAA looked at the ordinance related to those subjects and said, that is preempted, you may not have that. The next item, item 11, listed a measure to continue restrictions on operating hours. And again, this is the, I'll colloquially use the term, the nighttime curfew, right? The FAA disagreed with that measure as well, found on page 3-10, entitled Restrict Operating Hours, approved as a voluntary measure only. And I want to highlight that. They approved it only as a voluntary measure. Resolution 1910 does just that. It approves that as a voluntary measure. It does exactly what the FAA asked for. Now, it should be noted that the ordinances that, as they are currently written, there's nothing voluntary about them. They appear mandatory. And they include fines and penalties and a possible ban of use of the airport for up to 3 years. They're not voluntary, which is why we presented to the board, and the board passed Resolution 1910 to incorporate those voluntary measures. And again, I referenced 1910 here again. The next one is the noise compatibility plan recognizes that the operating hours are preempted by federal law, and here's what it says actually in the noise compatibility program itself, the ANCP. It says continue restrictions on operating hours. The responsibility for the enforcement is out of the airport district. However, because of federal preemption of restrictions on interstate commerce, the district is precluded from establishing a curfew or closing the airport between certain hours. Therefore, enforcement of existing airport operating hours must remain voluntary on the part of tenants, the airlines, and fixed-based operators. That is precisely what Resolution 1910 incorporates. It incorporates exactly what the FAA. And
When
and-
are you going to let the citizens talk?
Well, just a minute.
I'm going to have into this.
We're giving
and
comment
just
for them.
numbers and numbers and numbers.
Well, here's the thing, to pass an ordinance, we have to give the rational basis for it. And so, and I will tell you, you said you've been here for an hour and a half. The meetings, the open session meeting started at an hour ago, an hour and 10 minutes ago. So we're almost done. We're almost done.
How many of us object to how long this is going on?
Please.
All right.
That's not how this works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Please. Well, please, let's get done with the presentation, and then we'll open it up for public comment immediately after that. So thank you for your cooperation.
Okay, I'll skip some of these. Item 13 listed a measure to enact growth limitations and lease restrictions. The FAA stated in their review, disapproved. The document does not contain sufficient information to indicate this measure would contribute to reducing non-compatible land uses or to preventing additional non-compatible land uses. The FAA just said you can't do that, and it said as formulated, it would avoid. There's nothing to indicate that this would avoid the problem of unjust discrimination against the class of aeronautical users. Again, violating the Constitution. Item 17 was a request to accelerate FAR 36 compliance. This is related to the stage 2 aircraft and mandating that only stage 3 aircraft could fly in. And the FAA said this is approved as voluntary. And the airport agreed that they would only do it on a voluntary basis. I can tell you this is now irrelevant. This is implicated in Ordinance 308. But as I mentioned before, aircraft that operate in the airport today meet the noise guidelines of FAR 36. So here's the summary. Each of these 3 ordinances are invalid, unconstitutional, and or are ineffective. Leaving an invalid, ineffective, or unconstitutional ordinance in place is simply not a policy of good governance. We have seen in other jurisdictions groups that have initiated litigation against airports for not enforcing the ordinances they have on their books. And so it is a strong recommendation of staff that the 3 ordinances be repealed for those reasons. And I will, again, to beat this drum one last time, I will say Ordinance 308, 309, and 310, the subject matter they tried to regulate that the FAA disapproved are incorporated in Resolution 1910 as voluntary to the limit of what the FAA will allow you to do at this point. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, well, we will open it up for public comment at this time. We have a list that people signed in, so we will go through the list first. Then we'll open it up to anybody, and the list is for people that are in the audience. Then we'll open it up to anybody else who didn't get an opportunity to sign on the list. And then when that concludes, we will open it up to people that are visiting us remotely. So you will have 3 minutes to make your presentation to the board, and it should be directly related to this particular item. So thank you in advance for your cooperation, and let's get through this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could I make
Can you please hold down the noise a little bit? Go ahead.
make a request for professional courtesy? You do have an attorney representing the Monterey Fly Safe Coalition on the line, Mr. Stephen Tabor. For professional courtesy, I'd like for you to invite him to speak first, if that's okay.
Normally, we do give a little extended time. In the case of Mr. Tabor, you said?
I informed Mr. Tabor that he would have 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, then we will start off with Mr. Tabor.
Good morning, Chair Miller and members of the board. My name is Stephen Tabor of Leach, Tishman, Nelson Hardiman, and I'm here on behalf of the Monterey Fly Safety Coalition. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. While the Monterey Fly Safe Coalition would prefer that ordinances 308, 309, and 310 be left in place, we are asking you this morning to at least rescind or suspend Ordinance 933, which repeals those ordinances until proper environmental review under CEQA is completed. For decades, these ordinances were not just words on paper, they shaped how this airport was operated. Before ANCA was passed, the FAA itself recognized Monterey's nighttime curfew and training restrictions in its record of approval in 1986. And in 2008, the airport's official pilot's guide published those same curfews, touch and go limits, and altitude procedures as part of the airport's noise abatement program. Airlines and pilots complied. The result was that the community had real enforceable protections, and the community relied on those protections. Repeal removes those protections. The airport authority's failure to enforce these ordinances does not change the fact that these protections exist and limit noise from the airport. The provisions of the Federal Aviation Act cited in the staff report do not apply. These ordinances do not implicate FAA's sovereignty of the skies. Moreover, the FAA has specifically stated that the ordinances comply with federal law. They are not, nor have they ever been, superseded by federal law. Under CEQA, repealing these ordinances is a discretionary act and not a ministerial act, and therefore that makes it a project under CEQA. CEQA requires environmental review whenever action may cause environmental effects, and noise is a recognized environmental effect. The exemptions cited in Ordinance 933 do not apply. The existing facilities exemption only applies if there's no expansion of use, but repeal allows more flights at night and more training activities, which is clearly an expansion. The common sense exemption, also mentioned by Mr. Huber, only applies when it's absolutely certain that there can be no environmental impact. Here, there is at least a fair argument that lifting the curfew and training limits will increase the noise at the airport and in the community. That defeats the exemption. And CEQA's definition of a project explicitly includes the repeal of ordinances when they may cause change. I also want to emphasize that California courts have consistently frowned on attempts to evade CEQA review by claiming that the ordinance were never enforced. CEQA looks at the effects that the ordinance should have rather than whether or not the ordinance has been enforced. And here, the curfews and flight limits shaped operations for decades, whether through voluntary compliance or published airport policy. Take away the ordinances restricting operations, there will be an increase in operations during the prohibited time periods. If the district continues down this path, it risks litigation the board is likely to lose. If it also gives up
Okay,
protections.
you've exceeded 3 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Tabor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Huber, any response to those statements?
Well, no, I wouldn't provide a response. I wouldn't provide a response.
Okay.
I can do that at the end. Go ahead.
Okay.
Let the public speak.
Help me out since I didn't bring my glass.
He cannot read this, so I'll read it for him. The first name is Robert Yuha, Monterey.
Robert Yoha. I live across the airport on alternate 3 runway. Can you start your time?
Please turn your mics then, please. Yeah. We're being recorded.
And hold the mic.
It doesn't amplify.
Speak loudly, okay?
Yep.
Robert Yoha. Great. Go ahead. Here. Please. Thank you. I'll speak loudly. Robert Yoha, I live across from the airport. My name is Robert Noah. I live across from the airport. I grew up there. I became fascinated with aircraft living here. We've got 4,000 hours flying. I appreciate all your technical charts. I've almost died a couple times in the aircraft flying. I understand aircraft safety and also FAA regulations. What surprises me is that you're faced with the same conundrum that San Diego Airport had. And rather than hiding behind the FAA, they were proactive and said, our regulations were here before you passed that act, and we're going to implement them. And to say that you never implemented those regulations is not quite true. On alternative 3 route on the left side, we used to have 727s taking off over Del Monte Lake. They had a Pratt & Whitney Model 8 turbojet, last ever. In fact, that caused the Aircraft Noise Reduction Act. We had homes down there and the plasterboard was vibrating off the 2x4 studs. The nails came loose. I came back from college in about 1976 after they implemented the terms where they had airplanes going down the main runway and going off over the bay instead of going right over Del Monte Lake. It was a great change. But one of the things you missed in your entire presentation here tonight is you only talked about runway 28R and 10L, was 10L and 28R. You have 2 runways here, alternative 3, that take off over the Casanova neighborhood. None of your noise studies study those 2 runways. In fact, in your 2 general plans going all the way back to 2010, you failed to analyze the birds around our neighborhood. Since global warming has changed, we have hawks, we have flocks of seagulls and crows there. The airplanes taking off of alternate 3 routes, the 2 routes that go over Casanova, Oakville, and right down Airport Drive, are not in any of the county plans. They are lacking. You do not analyze the bird strikes, you do not analyze the noise control, and that's where all the general aviation is going. During car week, we had 75 airplanes taking off over alternate 3 route. Their route, and that's the one where the 727s were coming really low, and that was the 727 route that caused the increase in the takeoff and going over the bay. You need to take a look at your entire airport. You're doing a really good job of trying to be neighborly. But what's happened is, after COVID, things got relaxed. The flight school is what caused the turnarounds to be limited. I watched the first airplane do touch and goes and land with its wheels up. It held up the runway for 2 hours. That's what caused the prohibition of too many turnarounds. About a year and a half ago, I watched one of the flight school guys do 9 loops around the airport. I called ATC. I say, hey, this is 342 Euclid. Oh, it's no house. I don't file complaints. I'm an airplane. He ended up, after his 10th go around.
Mr. Chair, the speaker's time has expired.
Okay. I'm sorry, you're at 3 minutes now. Thank you.
Say you have, because I grew up before and after.
Thank you.
Rick Aldinger.
Good morning, I'm Rick Aldinger, a resident of Monterey. There was a time when flying out of Monterey was viewed for us as a last resort, done only when the other options of using San Jose or San Francisco just didn't work. Monterey's flight options were limited, often too late in the day when traveling east into later time zones. And for families or those on a limited budget, there was usually a hefty price penalty for fares out of Monterey, making it all the more difficult to choose our local airport. Thankfully, times have changed. Monterey has become our go-to choice for travel. The addition of early daily flights to a variety of connections means we are no longer looking at a 12 to 16-hour day of travel. We don't have the added expense of a hotel room in San Francisco or San Jose in order to make an early flight the next morning. And because more travelers are using Monterey, the airlines are able to offer much more reasonable and competitive fares. It would be a huge disappointment to lose the convenience and affordability we currently enjoy at our local airport. And finally, I would just suggest that the level of activity in and out of Monterey Airport indicates that we live in a prosperous community. I thank my lucky stars every day that I have the good fortune to live in a prosperous community. I would hate to think of the alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Soule.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing the public to speak on this. My concern is with the noise but mostly the hours of the operation. In hearing about this hearing today, I looked up and it was easy enough to find that FAA regulated in their 1990 Airport Noise and Capacity Act. They allowed the grandfathering in of any ordinance that was prior to November 5th of 1990. So when we just got presented with a lot of regulations, note that those were 1985. And in the 1990 Airport Noise and Capacity Act, they were specifically addressing the need for communities to have noise and airport reduction. Airport capacity reduction. You also, in your public notice that was published in the Herald in June of this year, for this ordinance 933, you list your reason was that only the FAA could do this. But that 1990 ordinance and that grandfather clause, which is in section 14, Title 14, section 161.7, it allows those earlier ordinance to stand as they were, not from the 1985 things that were before. You also, in your stated recorded newsletter or the newspaper announcement that is required by law, you cite then a Burbank airport case against Lockheed. So I looked that up. That was from 1973, over 50 years ago. And since then, the FAA on their very front website page talks about the commentary to Berkeley Airport, and they approved Burbank's Airport, their noise and their noise ordinance and their capacity. And by that, I mean the hours that they allow it to be done. And Burbank does have an ordinance, and it is from 10 to 7 that flights are allowed. So I ask you, it seems like your only point is that in July, you decided to make it a voluntary. I ask you to instead change and make it an enforceable hours of operation so that this ordinance that we, the public, relied on can be something that we can still rely on and to make it more compatible for the residents. I myself.
Thank you. We are at 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Joyce Hofferman.
Good morning. You need to recognize that you are also representing the community, and you need to understand your actions affect the community.
Can you hear her?
It's on.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Our community is asking that you do not rescind ordinance 308, 309, 310. These ordinances were enacted in response to significant community harms from airport operations, noise pollution, and diminished quality of life. The previous airport board of directors before federal ANCA 1990 law was enacted passed these ordinances to protect our community. You're trying to undermine these protections with your rescinding of these noise and safety ordinances with disregard for the community you represent. These three ordinances and the other ordinances you have attempted to rescind are protected by California and federal law. If you rescind these ordinances, you're exposing the airport to a lawsuit. Furthermore, during discovery process, the broken equipment on the east side of the airport and the relevant ordinances requiring the equipment to be operational would be exposed as a safety concern. The Airport Noise and Capacity Act was enacted to ensure national uniformity in future noise restrictions. While new restrictions require FAA approval, Congress carved out an explicit exemption, which is that ANCA does not apply to a restriction in effect prior to November 5th, 1990. Thus, pre-1990 ordinances are grandfathered and remain enforceable without FAA approval. I wish the airport directors and airport attorney would stop saying that ANCA invalidated the ordinances at issue. This is a false statement. Congress carved out an explicit exemption for these noise and safety ordinances. Also, please make Monterey Fly Safe Coalition's lawyer, Mr. Tabor's letter to the airport directors available to the media. I hope the directors read Mr. Tabor's letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah Hunter.
Good morning. First, thank you guys for being here. Thank you, board. Thank you, news media. This is a tale of two sides, in my opinion. All I want is peaceful coexistence. Here's the airport.
You need to be by the microphone.
Otherwise, people might be. Here's the airport. If you look to the north, I live in Seaside, where it goes off the map. The other side of the airport is where it's PG, Pebble Beach, all of that area, Old Town. What's been happening is unnecessary, unreasonable, voluntary small planes from flight schools all over Bakersfield, Sacramento, Fresno, Paso Robles, San Carlos. People that rent from our local flight school who need to get there every 3 months to keep their pilot license. They are doing way more than 4 touch and goes and whatnot. The problem is they have 5 airport choices. All of the other 4 are not urban, densely populated seaside. There's Salinas, there's Hollister, there's Watsonville. There are other places that they can go. I cannot move my home. Have you ever gone out camping and forgotten your mosquito spray? That's what it feels like sometimes 40 or 50 times a day. I want to state clearly, I am pro-airport. I am pro-pilot. My daddy was a bush pilot in Alaska. I am pro-tourism on the peninsula. I flew in here in '67 for the first time. I'm happy, but the commercial problems are for the people on the other side. The problems we have in Seaside have to do with flying below the 1,000-foot elevation, taking off instead of flying straight out. I talk to the flight school here. I say, Bridget, just tell all the pilots when they look down and see the ocean, then turn right. She agrees with me. She wants to help. Instead, they take off and turn immediately. And the other one, fly from Salinas straight down. They can land in Monterey, but instead they fly down the middle, over corridor, down, zoom my house, back up at 700 or 800 feet to circle back and land. I want peaceful coexistence. I don't want to feel like this board is a pilots association. I've attended since May. They're voluntary guidelines. If you take away these voluntary guidelines.
Thank you very much. You're at your time.
Paul Dyson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Paul Dyson. I'm a resident of Burbank, California, and I've just purchased a house in Pacific Grove. We'll be moving here as soon as possible. I'd spent just under a year as a member of the Burbank Airport Commission, appointed by the city of Burbank. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. And I think I could say comfortably that this meeting that's being conducted here could probably be or have been conducted at just about every airport community in the country. Noise is an issue that's not going to go away, nor is airport expansion. There's no doubt at all over that there'll be a continued use of both civil commercial aviation and general aviation. Just from my experience in Burbank, we do have a voluntary curfew. It's not an FAA approved curfew. It's a voluntary negotiated curfew. It runs from 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. I personally think that 7 a.m. is too late. If you are located on the West Coast, you need to have early departures to have effective connections in places like Denver and Dallas. But that's what we have, and by and large, it's adhered to by all of the major commercial airlines. We have a couple of FedEx and UPS flights that come in at 3 a.m., which I hear every day, I think. The other issue, of course, is general aviation. I don't pretend to understand all the issues here, because clearly general aviation and flight training is less of a thing at Burbank in general because of the sheer density of operations there. But I do commend that all of you study carefully the experience that Burbank has had over 4 decades of enormous expenditure on attorneys and consultants to get these various studies done and these arguments. And we ended up with a voluntary agreement at the end of the day anyway. And that's the way it needs to go, with some kind of negotiation and a voluntary agreement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Wright.
Just for the record, just state your name and.
Good morning, Matthew Wright, Vice President for Monterey Fuel Company. We operate the 2 FBOs on the field, Monterey Jet Center and Del Monte Aviation. I'm also a resident of Delray Oaks. I'm here to support the repeal of the ordinances on the basis that we believe it's good governance and cleaning up unused, unnecessary, and as been presented, likely unconstitutional ordinances. I want to give a perspective from a business owner on the airport that we literally touch probably 95% of the movement of the aircraft that operate on the airport here. And I can tell you it's understood by us and the groups that we serve that the first and foremost thing when we're operating is safety. And a lot of the things that we're talking about here have to do with safety, ILS approaches, pattern work. It all has to do with the safety of flight, which has been in the news a lot lately. But I will also say that it's very important to us as a business owner on the airport, as well as the pilots that operate in the environment, that we're conscientious about how we operate. We have customers, we get feedback from the community. And in my experience, pilots are very open to, and for the most part, will follow voluntary noise abatement procedures, like what we have here at Monterey. As a business, we also support that. We post it, we make it known to operators that utilize our services that there are voluntary noise restrictions and that they should follow them. To follow up on what the previous speaker had mentioned, and just to give some perspective, that these issues are not unique. I've been at various airports around the West. I've been at Anchorage. I've been at Scottsdale. I've been at Jackson Hole. They all have, to some extent, noise sensitivities. Jackson Hole is the only commercial airport inside of a national park. So you can imagine the noise sensitivities there. They have noise restrictions there, but like here in Monterey, it's voluntary. It works. I'd also like to comment on our interactions with the airport in terms of working together on the noise abatement, noise restrictions. It's my experience, again, having been at those other airports I just mentioned, that Monterey is being proactive, that they do care about the community, and that they're doing the right thing when it comes to noise abatement, doing what they can with regard to the restrictions the FAA puts.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Matt Castellanic. Did I say it right?
Oh, there's another.
Good morning. I'm Matt Pastelaniak. I'm a local pilot. I am an unofficial representative or spokesperson for the Monterey Pilots Association, which comprises over 50 members right now. I would tell you that 2-3 years ago, we did not have that organization. And it's something that we've worked hard to incorporate and work through problems with the airport and the surrounding area. I'm also a volunteer airport support network, a volunteer for the Airline Owners and Pilots Association. My boss, or the person I work with, is the Southwest Pacific AOPA representative. In the interest of trying to keep this short, I will just tell you that my own personal opinion is that I am in support of the repeal of these 3 ordinances that we've been talking about all day. I am in support of the resolution 1910, which incorporates the current voluntary noise abatement procedures, which are currently and have been for a while listed on the airport website. And I would tell you that as the unofficial representative for the Pilots Association, or the Monterey Pilots Group, I can tell you that the overwhelming opinion of those folks is in support of both of those items as well. The people that I have talked to extensively also have no problem, for the most part, in complying with the voluntary noise abatement procedures. In response to comments that were made earlier about directly flying over the housing areas to the north, Marina, Seaside, I can tell you from personal experience that there are times when I have tried to come back from the north on a direct route and have been directed by the tower, by ATC, to fly to the coast, start down the coast, and then at some point telling me to enter the pattern, which would take me directly over Seaside and Marina. So while we have the leeway to fly under visual flight rules, a lot of times that does not preclude and is often impacted by the tower's directions, which are mandatory and we have to follow to fly overhead the cities and such, and at an altitude that's supposed to be 1,000 feet above those levels. So in closing, both myself and I think the Pilots Association would say that they are supportive of the repeal of the ordinances and also 1910, the voluntary noise abatement procedures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Curcio.
It's cold here.
Good morning, Chair Miller, directors, Gary Curcio, and Director of Government Affairs for the Monterey County Hospitality Association. I'd like to show you a little bit of a different perspective than you're going to be hearing from most of the speakers today. MCHA has over 230 members that employ over 27,000 hospitality professionals. I'd like you to consider the impact on all of those employees and industry by limiting hours of operation and reducing additional activity. If you think briefly back to COVID, which I think none of us want to spend much time on, but keep in mind that during that early period of COVID, when all of the hotels and restaurants on the Monterey Peninsula were closed, the city of Monterey's budget came to its knees. Now, I realize that's the far end of the scale, but it is very important. So far, the airport is doing a terrific job trying to do exactly what is not only best for the community, but with what's best for also business and hospitality as well. So I would urge the directors to accept the staff recommendation to repeal ordinances 308, 309, and 310. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Chabajian.
And you said it right too. Thank you. My name is Carol Chorbajian. I am a Monterey resident and business owner, and I actually am right at the end of the runway there where I live, my neighborhood. I am again saying I'm in favor of the repeal of 308, 309, 310, and supporting 1910. I came here in 1976 to go to graduate school expecting to come and go, and I didn't. Board Ord was open. And for people who now have moved here in the late 90s to semi-retire, they would have been staggered by the noise. And before deregulation, how many aircraft were here? And it didn't bother anybody. And I think, well, yeah. And when did you move here? Sorry. Sorry. We in the hospitality industry rely on the service from Monterey. I grew up in an airline family. My father was very, very strict about regulating, following what the FAA says you have to do. And people here continue to forget this is a federal facility regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration, and none of us have the opportunity or ability to change what the FAA says we have to do. And I just want us to keep that in mind as we continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich Lind. Did I say it right? Sorry, I'm having a hard time reading that one. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Rich Lind. I live at 98 Seafoam, Del Monte Beach. And in the past, I've been president 3 or 4 times, NIP rep, and so on. And I moved here in 1971. I've certainly seen a lot of changes. We've had 2 houses on the same street, about 4 doors down, due to a variety of things. Let's see. I want to talk about obviously 308, 9, and 10 and what they were doing. And I'm going to ask a few things repetitively. Who do you represent? And then I go on to these ordinances were needed in 1978. And I was a member of the group that took a look at them under leadership of Pat Ball, one of you, many, many years ago. And we came first and negotiated with each other. It was definitely an open negotiation and there wasn't hostility. And with that, I say again, who do you represent? Let's see. So now we have a greater population than we had before. And back then, daughter's birthday was halted due to the noise, couldn't carry it on. And then after this committee met, there were almost no problems. And speaking of that, let's see, what was I going to, I'll go on with my notes. Non-neighborhood meeting, stopped just recently. We couldn't hear each other. And St. Carlos Cathedral, we did, well, priests are used to keep on going during noise, and he certainly did. The rule of safety cannot be underestimated. That's what guided everything. And so you took the word voluntary, and I looked it up. And they talked about someone who was requested to help at a charity event. That was voluntary. And yes, this was voluntary. It was suggested that these things happen, but it could not be required. Safety was everything. And I think to begin with, we had somewhere between 30 and maybe 60% compliance. And when things didn't happen like that, they were talked to, not with any punishment, not something like that, just could you go by this? And let's see. The noise complaint. Yeah, that's a joke. I'm sorry. It's awful. I thought it was real the way it was under our day and age. And so I called, what was it, about 7 or 8 times during 2 weeks. I had the time of it, etc. And I asked them to call me back. Nobody ever did. It was like something was already being decided upon. But that's not good. That's not good for neighborhood relationships. And I got that part. And I was thinking at least 3 neighborhoods were directly affected. But listening to this, no, it's more like 5.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you.
Christina Lloyd.
Hi, my name is actually Christina Miller.
Sorry.
It's okay. I've worked at Lloyd's Shoes for 24 years. I sell shoes to everybody. The reason why I'm here is not to complain. It's actually just to say I think that this community would thrive on extending the airport. I've lived here my whole life. My family has had businesses, and when the people come in, the money comes in. So that's all I have to say. I hope that you guys have a good outlook on it and everybody gets along over it.
Thank you.
John Steers?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm John Steers and I live on the commercial side. I'm just off to the side of the airport. I can watch planes come and go from my house, not very far away. And I can also hear noise from the fairgrounds. So I'm used to noise. Steve Tabor made a comment, and I just kind of picked up on it. I had some notes even before he spoke, but the aspect of removing volunteerism aspects or removing some of these ordinances that we're here for. I don't totally understand all of that, but if you remove this or you remove that, what do you have left? Some kind of ordinance, one way or another, needs to exist to ultimately protect those who live around the airport, which is why we're here for this meeting to start with. So whatever direction it goes, it needs to go for that sake, I believe. As far as commercialism, I support that also. I've been here since, I was basically raised here, but I've been back since the early 80s. And other than COVID, commercialism has thrived quite well in Monterey. If they can get past the zoning aspects of building places for people to stay. That's another issue. But as far as the noise, we all appreciate that some planes are lighter and they don't make as much noise. However, they all make noise, and I think it's going to stay that way as long as the fuel, they fuel them the same way. The issue, I think, more, at least from my perspective and maybe some others, is the timing. During the daytime, commercial planes come and go. We go about our business, and if we're, watching some concerts or something at the fairgrounds, that gets in the way. But otherwise than that, we used to use airplanes taking off almost as like an alarm clock in the morning, 6 o'clock, 6:15, they go off. Now they go off earlier, and they wake people up. And some of the planes can sneak in the middle of the night, but they're not the commercial planes. The commercial planes coming and going late into the night when people are trying to sleep, or especially early, the wee hours of the morning, so to speak, I think is something that needs to be addressed. And that's kind of the gist of what I just wanted to share. Departing planes usually make less noise than the planes departures taking off usually make more noise than the planes coming in. So flights leaving early, again, real early, can be an issue for people who are on the path or right next to the path. And I just, consider those and appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Daniel Ma?
New to this issue, I came with open mind and I heard what Mr. Adam was saying. And I think what I heard was very technical, right? Trying to clarify the rule. And I heard pro-business, that makes sense, and some of the residents. I think what I didn't hear was really address our issue and really lazy in some ways. Communicating, is it clarifying? Are we trying to make improvements? I think the real issue is people are worried that we're growing. They don't have issue today per se, but what will happen 5 years from now? If these ordinances were put in place before, there must be a reason, and that helped. And taking this out or modifying it, their concern is it's going to get worse. And I don't think those concerns are being communicated or addressed. I just want to say that I think if we do a little better job of communicating with the residents, timing for one, I'd take day off to kind of share about this. But I think if there's some building of communication and concerns, I think this would be much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard Fosler.
Good morning. My name is Howard Fosler. I live in New Monterey. And I'm here to talk with you as a private citizen today, not as a representative of anyone else. I want to start by reminding you who owns the airport. It is a small group of your neighbors that live in what you call the airport district. They hired you to run the airport on their behalf to serve our greater community and the flying public. Your first duty is to the people you work for, not the public, although the owners expect you to perform well for our patrons. Over the years, we have done exceedingly well in meeting these duties. You have done exceedingly well meeting these duties. They have, as they have changed. We now have over 300,000 people using this facility and over 100 flights a day. It's a busy place. It's a big responsibility. But I want to remind you that it is the owners that you are primarily responsible to. Years ago, there were problems with the complaints about the run-up noise of engines, overhead traffic noise, and so on and so on. They're all still there. Now is a different form, but they're still here, pretty much the same. I'm delighted with the way the three ordinances are being handled. It's going to take care of that problem very well. And then there's a litigation issue with CEQA and so on, a bit worked out by the attorneys. It's important to get that done as promptly as possible to avoid all the delay. We all have complex problems. That's why we have you to do these things for us. They are complex, and we rely on you to do that. You are on your way with very good possibility on your way with the possible transfer of training flights to nearby airports. You're on your way with the Monterey 5 procedure, which when it works is very effective in reducing noise. You are on your way with a new terminal that will mitigate much of the early morning noise. Please remember that you are the landlord for the flight schools. You control their behavior. Please remember that if Monterey 5 is used properly, most of the problems will be solved. It needs to be enforced. Your neighbors have great faith in you. Most of you have served a long time here, and we are very grateful for your good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chantal Melendez.
Almost close, Chantal Melendrez.
Sorry.
Thank you. Like this, okay. I live in Via Del Monte neighborhood, which if you look at the runway and you go across the freeway, it's kind of right there. And I understand you guys are kind of like on the fence, right? Gotta try to figure out solutions for a lot of different people, the hospitality industry and residents and so forth. And then of course, all the employees who are here. We are the owners of two houses who were the recipients of those noise abatement windows quite a few years back. We have two houses. My son lives in one with his family, and we're in the back. I have another son who's a pilot, so I understand the benefits of airports and everything it brings to the community. I have family who's in the hospitality industry, so I say those things just to let you know I understand that you're on the fence, but I'm not hearing very much talking about the quality of life that we all moved here for. And the airport does affect that, and tourism does affect that, good and bad, both ways. I just want to remind you that the quality of life of all those who live on the peninsula, not every single spot, but definitely surrounding and under the flight paths, that you're affecting in our neighborhood. There's Bayview Academy. It used to be an adult school, mostly had classes at night, but it's been quite a few years now. It's been an elementary school. My little grandson goes to school there. And welcome to school. School starts at 8:30, so there's no way that any of the people who go to that school could come here when your meetings are at 8. There's Franny Baseball Park, Laguna Grande Park, a lot of outdoor activity because of the rec trail. That's both on Fremont and connects down Casa Verde to along the beach. And the noise affects the property values. So please keep that in mind when you make your decisions. I wouldn't want to have to make your decisions, but just want to speak up for the people in my neighborhood and the things that are they're pertaining to families, entertainment, weekend baseball games, all that stuff. I leave you with one last thing. My little grandson, who's 4, when he was 3 a year ago, he'd come knock on our door in the morning, little PJ's hair sticking up. And his question would be, Oma, did you get woken up by the airplane this morning? And thank you for letting me speak at your meeting. I did fly on the Concorde. It was in October 1978. It's very noisy, but I don't think it's flying in the US since about 2002 or 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony Melendez.
Hi, thanks. It's Melendrez.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. Thank you everybody for being here. And last time I was in this room was a house like this, and it was a quality of life issue. And when you made the decision, contrary to what what this side was recommending with the private fire department, and you guys chose the municipal. And thank you for making that decision. And I know it was a tough one. Today I'm here also as a citizen, and my wife that was speaking before me, and so we live on Garden Avenue, and we're opposed to this change. We believe that the ordinance was put in place for a reason, and we moved to the Monterey Peninsula in 1988, and I can tell you that the noise from the air traffic was not what it is today, even with Fort Ord being over there, from my experience. And when we had the opportunity to move this airport over to that airport, the board decided against it and cited reasons that this is a more convenient place. You could do better things with this location, and the noise issues and all those other things that people were concerned about back then. You ensured us that that would be handled appropriately. I'm sure if you were here then you would remember that, because that turned into a pretty big deal. Right now, we get woken up, or we're already awake at 5:07 and 5:15. Not every morning, but several mornings. You must know that those commercial aircraft, the large commercial aircraft, take off at that time. And decibel level isn't measured on the aircraft taking off. And for people that are on the ground that are behind the engines that are accelerating to gain altitude, but that's far exceeds 60 decibels or 90 decibels. And so when you're in that line, you're catching a lot of noise, enough to wake children up, enough to wake babies up, enough to wake adults up, so it's a quality of life issue, right? If you can't get a good night's sleep because you work late and you go to bed late and you get up early, I mean, it's good to know that maybe the first aircraft's going to take off at 6 a.m. rather than 5:07 or 5:15 a.m. That an Airbus 320 isn't going to be taken off over your house at an early hour. So it is a time issue for me as a private citizen here. It is time, which affects quality of life. And thanks again for your service. And I know that you guys will make the right decision.
Thank you.
Holly Osborne.
Hi, I live in Old Town Monterey. I went to grammar school here, so I know what it's like to hear 2 and 2 are. I feel like, the discussion of moving the airport is a really good one because we're growing and growing. I support standing up to all the powers that be and keeping our ordinances in place. I don't completely understand why it's unconstitutional to have rules that are enforced. But I'll leave that to somebody else. Anyway, I support keeping the ordinances.
Thank you.
Holly Mason-Heimer.
I am Holly Mason-Heimer. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. And I live on Rosita Road. I bought my house 29 years ago. It's loud. It wakes me up all the time. And we used to honor the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. agreement much more closely than we do. And that's the truth. Everybody will back me up on that one. Another concern I have is my neighborhood is enveloped in thick jet fuel sometimes. It happened 2 nights ago, and it came in and was in my bedroom. Thick jet fuel. It was pretty bad. I had to get up and turn on the air purifiers. Yes, it's loud. Yes, it is a quality of life issue. We also have a lot of amazing wildlife here, and they are impacted by the noise and the exhaust fumes, just like we are. And with this flight school, we know that the most concerning safety issues of flight is upon takeoff and landing. And we know that twice in the history of this airport, homes have been had an airplane fly into it. One lady was doing her dishes, and out her kitchen window, she saw an airplane coming right at her house. She grabbed her 2 babies, ran out the door, her house burned to the ground, and she lost her dog. Thank you. This is a densely populated area, and we have an airport in Salina 17 miles away that also supports our tourism industry. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Uwe Grobecker.
Stepped out.
Tom Reeves.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Tom Reeves. I'm a retiree living in New Monterey. And as many of us retirees know, we worry about waking up on time for certain things, like getting to this meeting. Well, this morning, it was no problem because my wife and I sleep with the window open, and at 5:20, there was the plane taking off, which woke me up. So I understand that probably one of the reasons they're turning the way they are is because of noise issues. So typically they'll take off along runway 10 right, and then they make a right-hand turn, which then points the rears of the engines right towards the populated area. And of course, as other speakers have said, they're trying to gain altitude, so they have the throttle up. The landings don't seem to be so much of a problem for us. So another perception by my wife and I is that when we bought our property in 1989, we would lie in bed around 10 o'clock. We'd hear taps at the Presidio, as well knows. And then there would be the last flight of the night, and we'd tuck ourselves in, and that was a peaceful night's rest. And then you wouldn't have to worry about a plane waking you up in the morning because the first takeoff was around 7 o'clock. So all your statistics that were shown, that's all fine and good, but perception is reality in many ways. And my perception is that there's more traffic, and it's early morning and late night traffic. Now, I know the businesses, the way you measure success oftentimes is by, your profit and loss margins. In an airport, it's the number of flights you have, the number of passengers you run through the airport. I get it. Those are all great statistics, but what you're hearing here is friction now between the businesses and the airport and the residents, who, as other speakers have said, are the people you're representing here. So now to my question, which is that however this shakes out, FAA regulations, usurp local, blah, 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 all that. You do have contracts, I believe, though, with a lot of these FBOs, with the airlines, with the flight schools, as has been mentioned. Maybe the mechanism to get this accomplished isn't through these ordinances. It's through writing it into the contracts you have with the leaseholders and the airlines, giving them certain restrictions on takeoff and landing hours. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Helen Birdsong. And your last but not least.
Oh, good, thank you. I live directly at the end of the runway, so I catch everything, which is good and bad. I'm retired, and I used to get up at 5 in the morning because I had 2 businesses. I no longer have to, but I still get up at 5:10 in the morning because I'm woken. If I happen to have the window closed, it may not wake me, but if the window's open. I've noticed this morning by 6:54, 4 aircrafts had taken off from 5-ish. So there's something not right on the numbers, and we can all get volatile and all self-righteous. And I realize everybody's doing what they can, and it's a tremendous asset for us all. I travel to the East Coast 2 or 3 times a year. I'm very lazy because I take the noon flight and arrive at midnight. That's just my choice. But I think 6 a.m. is a reasonable time. It used to be 7, and it's okay saying it was voluntary. I looked it up also, and it does say that, and it says it very clearly that the FAA said no to it. It's a voluntary thing, but it was actually enforced somehow, coerced, forced. People did do it, and I don't remember flights coming in after 10 at night. Maybe 10:30 if one of them was late. It's now a regular event that flights come in at 11 and a little later. That one wakes me as well if I'm actually asleep. If I'm trying to watch TV, I can't hear it. It comes in. So the noises, it's like an electric car. We tell you you'll get 250 miles to a battery. It's on an electric treadmill for a car. It doesn't tell you you've got to accelerate to 50 miles an hour and keep it there. And this is what the gentleman was saying about the planes. When they're flying, the decibel might be that. But when they're coming in and leaving, it's much higher. And if we could encourage the voluntary mandates or whatever name we want to put on the ordinances, and we seem to for 46 years. It's only come up now. They were passed in 79, and suddenly it's come up now. And certainly we bought in 99, we moved away, we came back, and there's way more aircraft now, way more aircraft. And I know you all work hard, and I know that you all try to do it fair to everybody and all the staff and everyone, and I thank you for that. But it is a community, and it's not just wealthy, it's not just private jets. There's middle class, there's even poor people that live here. It's not just the mega rich. And we all rely on tourism in some way or another. And we all want it. Nobody wants it to go away. But do they have to come in at 4 a.m. in the morning or 5 a.m.? Can they not come in a little later?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have, actually we have 2 more. Brian Shields.
Hello, good morning. My name is Brian Shields. I'm a field rep with Carpenters Local 646, the local Carpenters Union. Chair Miller and Board of Directors, thank you for conducting a solid public governmental meeting. Not to disrespect the neighbors here, as they have many concerns and many of them seem very valid. Adoption of 933 brings MROI into the current compliance, so we need to support it, especially with the federal oversight that's been happening recently. With the cutting of funds, the cutting of grants, all of that, we need to be in compliance with the federal government. I applaud MROI staff and directors for tackling this difficult issue. Thank you. MROI is a real economic heartbeat for Monterey County, and it is for our members who are going to be going to work on your new terminal, which is launching right the next generation and this generation into the middle class and keeping them there, providing solid opportunities, healthcare, and all of the above. Because of these mandatory ordinances, 308, 309, 310 are superseded by federal law. They have never been enforced by MPAD and were disallowed by the FAA in 1986. They should be repealed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesus Vega.
Good morning. My name is Jesus with Carpenters Local Union 646. And while I hear the concerns from some of the residents of Monterey, I'm here to share concerns about ordinances 308, 309, and 310, and then the unintended consequences they may have had for the past 45 years or so, not just for aviation, but for the long-term growth of our community and especially our youth. Ordinance 308 restricts airport operating hours with exceptions for emergency aircraft and those meeting the lowest takeoff and landing levels under Amendment 8 to the Federal Air Regulation 36, as well as certain runway use for requirements. This ordinance discourages both commercial and general aviation traffic that directly impacts the regional economy. Fewer flights mean fewer business opportunities, less tourism, and reduced incentives for airlines and aviation businesses to invest in Monterey. Ultimately, our community risks being left behind in a competitive and growing industry. Ordinance 309 regulates aircraft at altitudes and maneuvers within 5 miles of the airport, including turns in the pattern and overflight of terrain. While it may be intended to improve safety and reduce noise, this ordinance crosses into federally controlled airspace, which is sole jurisdiction of the FAA. Imposing local altitude and maneuvering rules creates confusion for pilots, increasing safety risks, especially for those unfamiliar with local procedures, and opens the door to legal challenges. It puts our airport at odds with national aviation standards and may discourage flight operations altogether. Ordinance 310, which restricts touch and go and stop and go operations, strikes at the heart of flight training. These maneuvers are essential for pilot development, and limiting them disrupts youth aviation programs, flight schools, and anyone working toward a career in aviation. Together, ordinances 308 and 310 and 309 also restrict work opportunities for not just for pilots, but for local residents and our youth. As flight operations decline, so do jobs in the airport services, maintenance, hospitality, education, logistics, and tourism. Fewer operations mean fewer employers, fewer internships, fewer apprenticeships, and ultimately fewer chances for our young people to build careers right here in their community. If we want Monterey to thrive, not just as a destination, but as a place for our youth to grow, learn, work, and live, we need to protect access to industries that offer real long-term opportunity. Aviation is one of them. In short, those ordinances, though likely well-intended back in the late 70s, have limited growth of our airport, our economy, and the future of our people who live here. That's why I support and adopt ordinance number 933 and repeal the over 45-year-old ordinances 308, 309, and 310. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's everyone who signed up.
Oh, is there anybody?
No,
Okay.
this is just everyone who signed up.
Well, I wanted to open it up to anybody that's left in the room that didn't get an opportunity to sign that one to speak. Please step forward, say your name and what city you're from, and you will have 3 minutes, sir.
I'm Paul Fleischman from Monterey. A marriage counselor might be more effective than lawyers in resolving this issue. The public says we want more peace and quiet. The board says we can't give it to you because the FAA sets the rules. What's missing from this position? Any recognition that the public's desires are valid. We don't feel heard. The 1970s ordinances showed a very different attitude. From Ordinance 310, quote, whereas the district board has an obligation to the citizens of the surrounding residential areas to reduce aircraft noise annoyance where it's reasonably possible to do so, ... The current board's response, jettison the ordinances, not find ways to support their intent. This is reflected in the board's mission statement, which directs the board to, quote, operate the airport in a safe, efficient, sustainable, and fiscally responsible manner. What's missing in that? Any mention of the surrounding community. That community is present, however, in the San Jose Airport Commission's mission statement, quote, to meet the needs of the traveling public without unduly affecting property and persons located near the airport. It's in San Luis Obispo, quote, to coordinate planning at the state, regional, and local levels so as to provide for the orderly development of air transportation while at the same time protecting the public health, safety, and welfare. It's in Sonoma. The Sonoma County Airport is committed to being a good neighbor. It's in Reno. The Reno Tahoe Airport Authority provides near real-time flight tracking data, noise program information, and a citizen-led airport noise advisory panel to support our community and ensure we collaborate with them as we continue to expand our services. Sailing and flying have a lot in common, and there's a saying in sailing, take your head out of the boat, meaning don't get so absorbed in some minor detail that you forget to notice you're headed for the rocks. I think that's the message many of us are sending you today. Look up and notice the bigger picture. The airport is part of a community of people. Not all of them fly. This is something that should always be in view alongside the FAA rules and other consideration. If you've forgotten, we're here to remind you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else present here in the chambers? So is it the desire of the board that we take a break at this time? We have about 6 people that want to speak remotely. By popular demand, we'll take a 10-minute break and we will be back at 10:40. At that time, we'll conclude public comment remote.